Hello and welcome to this week's video. My name is Anuska Taylor. Thank you so much for joining me. It's so great to have you here. And before I get started on today's juicy topic, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. I really am so appreciative of all of you who have subscribed. And also don't forget to give my video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And also ask me a question, leave a comment. The only questions I can't really answer are very specific tailored questions to you and your voice, because I have to be able to see and hear you speak. There's just too many variables with the voice. So if you do want personal feedback, support, guidance, help, do book a private session below. All the links are below to how to work with me and how to find out more. So today's video is all about how your success persona is limiting your voice. And the people that follow me, the people I work with, they have senior positions in organizations, they run their own businesses, they are out there doing great things in the world and are very successful. And with that success comes this success persona. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the persona is, and then the opposite of that, which is the shadow, and how this impacts the voice, and then what this means for your success. But before I just start that, just to say, if you don't know, as well as a voice coach, and I've studied for about 15 years in terms of vocal technique and voice physiology and vocal function, and I've taught singers for many years. I still do teach a little bit of singing, but predominantly now my work is with speakers and professionals. But as well as that, I'm also a Jungian life coach. So I have been studying Jungian psychology, so the work of Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, for the past, I think, about 6 or 7 years now. And I bring this into my coaching because I think, as you're going to see in this video, it really has such a profound impact on the voice. And I realized there was this incredible connection, which I hadn't really seen many people really speaking about. But I think the important aspect of my work is it's not clinical, it's not about therapy, it's really in a coaching model. Whether I'm working with someone on their voice or whether we're doing some of the shadow work and this voice persona work that I'm talking about today, it's all about potential. It's all about transcending the ego and really getting out of your own way to create incredible possibilities and opportunities in your life. So I just want to make that clear. This is not therapy. This is very much within a coaching model, because Jung did work with some very mentally ill patients. So let's just talk briefly about the persona shadow. We'll start with the persona. The persona is really a social mask, and we all have a persona, every single person on this planet, because it really is very adaptive. It's one of the clever ways that we have adapted to sort of fit in the world, and it's created really from a very young age, and it helps us to fit in. It helps us to feel accepted in the world, to get our needs met. And we really learn what to put in our persona or what to show in our persona by what is going to be accepted and what's not going to be accepted. And we learn this, our parents or our caregivers might actually say, do this, don't do this. If you do this, people will like you. If you do this, people won't like you. Sometimes it's very blatant. Sometimes it's more, we watch behaviors, we watch reactions of people around us, and we learn very quickly, okay, when my mum does that, then people really hate it. When my dad did that, everyone thought he was amazing. And so we learn very quickly, okay, when I do that, I'm going to be accepted. When I do that, I'm not going to be accepted. I'm talking about this very simply as much as I can. It's obviously quite complex and it's going to look different for different people. But just to say very simply, it is the social mask we wear to help us fit in. We don't necessarily remember when we start to create it. Now, importantly, very importantly with my work, the voice forms part of the persona, and actually persona literally translates as per, through, sona, sound, through sound. So our voice is absolutely integral to this persona. Whatever we've learned behaviorally is going to help us fit in. That also impacts our voice. And this is why, for me, if you don't address this shadow, the persona shadow of what you've created, you're really just working on the surface with your voice. Because this is really where the juice is. This is really where the work is. What have you decided is right and wrong? and most of it is unconscious. So whatever doesn't fit our persona will get rejected and be pushed into the shadow. And the shadow is by definition unconscious. This happens when we're very young. It's not going to be logical. We're not going to remember. We're not going to sit down one day and say, okay, I'm going to put you in the shadow because I don't want to deal with this anymore. It doesn't happen like that. It happens, it's very emotional. And that's why I always say to clients, the transformation is in the emotion. It's not, you can't access it logically. So the more emotionally triggered you are by something, the more you know it's pointing to your shadow. And often those things that really trigger us, particularly when we have a lot of anger or criticism around something, it's very hard for the ego to see it's got any relation to us at all. But just remember, it doesn't mean you are that. It's just there's an aspect of your personality that you're avoiding in that. And when we don't integrate it, it's really controlling our life. But as well as things that we really hate and we really criticize and judge, it's also things that we love and we really idolize. So whatever we put on those two extremes goes into our shadow. But just remember, the key is in the emotion. The more emotion you're feeling, the more you know it's shadow. So that's one thing. So the triggers that you feel around extreme emotion. Another one is if you find yourself constantly repeating the same patterns, you feel like it's kind of Groundhog Day. So you are maybe always attracting unavailable men or women into your life. You know, you're dating or you're trying to find a relationship and you just keep going out with people that aren't ready for commitment or aren't interested in you. And there's something therefore in you unconsciously that is drawing those people into your life. So when it becomes a pattern, again, you know there's something in the shadow. It could be work. It could be you're always being laid off. It could be that you're always going into debt, like you can never keep any money in your bank account. So it's anything where you see a pattern. It could be anything, but you think, oh God, not this again. I'm here again. You know there's something in your shadow. And then the other one, which is a whole massive topic in itself, and I'm not going to go into this today, is our dreams. And when we can learn to interpret them and understand them, and not interpret them literally, but really understand the depth of meaning in them, that can really tell us a lot about what's going on in this unconscious part. But anyway, let's talk now about the success persona. So that's very briefly, just so you understand that, you know, we have these different, we all have a persona, we have different personas for different parts of our life. And again, the general kind of premise of the persona is to help us survive, fit in, and feel safe. But it is very limiting because we are putting a lot of energy into pushing the opposite away, i.e. the shadow. So let's look at how this then relates to you in a busy career, running a company, having a huge team underneath you in a very senior executive position maybe. So you might be thinking, well, that's all great, but what's this got to do with my success and what's this got to do with my voice more specifically? So as I mentioned, we have multiple personas for different scenarios in our life. And again, it's all about fitting in, it's all about adapting, it's all about what's going to help me survive in a particular scenario, but it's very limiting. So when we go into the workforce, when we decide on a particular career or we go into a particular field or industry, whether we're aware of it or not, we're going to start absorbing what persona do I have to take on to be successful, to fit in within this industry or this career or this organization. Even organizations within themselves have their own cultures. Of course, we know that to be true. So we then start to take on characteristics of what it means to be successful in this particular career or field. So whether it's academia or law or medicine or IT or data or accountancy or coaching, it doesn't really matter. There is going to be a particular persona for each industry that you are, whether you're aware of it or not, are trying to absorb in some shape or form. And of course, this includes how we use our voice. So let me give you a few examples. Now, I've worked with clients across a vast array of industries now, and I've come to see some sort of themes. So I'm obviously not going to mention any names, but I'm going to talk about 3 slightly different careers just to give you an idea of how this might show up. So the first one is academia. And often in this field, whether you are conscious of this or not, you are taught on some level it's not okay to be expressive when you speak, because the focus has got to be on the research, has got to be on the data, has got to be on the content that we're sharing. So any kind of expression, excitement, or energy in the voice is really almost seen as a distraction. So let's just keep the pitch really low. Let's sound almost like we're bored. Let's limit the expression, maybe even mumble, and then that's how we fit in. And I have seen this time and time again in this particular field. Now, this isn't to say everyone does this, but this is a general theme that I have seen. And so often people in this field have a really hard time with expression because it feels very uncomfortable. Because whether they have been told explicitly or it's implicit, it's not okay to be expressive. So just keep your voice flying under the radar and let the research speak for itself. So the second one is law. So lawyers, barristers, anyone sort of in senior within the sort of legal profession. And the voice persona often is someone who has a very powerful voice, very authoritative, and almost could be said to be quite domineering. And what is not acceptable is to have a gentle, weak, meek, mild, quiet voice. And so often when I work with lawyers or barristers, they have a really hard time finding more gentility and vulnerability in their voice, because it's almost like I don't want to be walked over and I want to be taken seriously. And if I have any kind of gentility in my voice, any softness in my voice, any vulnerability in my voice, I'm not going to be taken seriously. And then the final one, and again, these are just examples. So I'm not saying every single person fits in with this, but to give you an idea. So the final one is, we could say the sort of the healing profession. So whether it's sort of yoga, meditation, spiritual teaching, that type of thing. Now, the voice persona often with these people is the opposite of the lawyers. It's often very gentle, very quiet, very meek, very mild. Let's just keep the voice very contained. And the opposite, of course, of that, what's very uncomfortable then for those types of people is expressing anger, is finding more authority in their voice and actually really standing their ground, standing up for themselves. So finding any real strength, power, and authority is usually very challenging, because again, it goes against the persona. You know, I don't want to sit in a meditation and be shouted at. So this is where it comes in, and this is where it can be very limiting. Now, what I'm not saying is that, you know, you have a gentle, quiet voice because you're a meditation teacher, and now you're going to start screaming and shouting at everyone in a meditation. That's not what I'm saying. But you've got to start to see that this is a persona that you've taken on as a way of fitting in. And it usually goes beyond that career, that field. You'll find often, and I've found certainly with the clients that I've worked with, that this impacts every area of their life. So, and you know, and it's not an accident why people go into certain careers as well. So perhaps that was your voice persona from a young age, and you were naturally drawn to something that allowed you to express yourself in that way. But the important thing is we want it to be a conscious choice, because there's going to be times where you do need to be more assertive. You do need to find more strength and power in your voice. Just like, say, with the lawyers, there's going to be times where you want more gentility and vulnerability, and you might want to connect with people in a different way. So it's having the ability to access those different parts of your voice, but also it's allowing yourself to access those different parts of your voice versus feeling like I cannot leave this box that I've created for myself because I might not get respected, people might not like me, I might get ignored, I might lose my job, fill in the blank. So you can see how this can be very, very limiting. And ultimately, what all my work is about you accessing your natural voice, which is your authentic voice, which means that you have all the colors. You can access strength, power, authority, assertiveness if you need to, if you choose to. And you can also access gentility and vulnerability and softness and quietness in the voice if you want to, but you're not feeling like you can't leave that particular persona. And for a lot of the clients I work with, it's very uncomfortable when they try and do the opposite. So if they're used to speaking very quietly, it's very uncomfortable for them to start finding more power. Just as when I've worked with people that have very loud voices, very domineering voices, they find it very hard to find more vulnerability in their voice because that to them is a weakness. So again, you can see how this is very, very limiting. And ultimately, the true voice is not afraid to be expressive, and it's able to choose how it expresses itself versus is limited by conditioning, limited by this persona shadow. So the other aspect to this is asking for help. Now, often, and I'm guilty of this as well, so this is not a judgment, but often when we are very successful, that we've got this persona of success and this independent streak, we don't like asking for help. And usually we wait for things to kind of implode, or we can't take it anymore before we ask for help. And I see this particularly with very successful people. They kind of wait until it's just got so bad that now I have to do something about it. So often when we're in this kind of push and pull with the persona shadow, it does bring up a lot of fear and anxiety and stress around our voice. We may not intellectually know that's what's going on, but there's this kind of, something just doesn't feel right. And we have a lot of anxiety around speaking, and we feel a discomfort, could be physical, but more likely an emotional discomfort. And we keep putting it off, and we don't really want to ask for help because we don't want to admit perhaps that there's something that needs to change. The ego is very committed to us holding on to our current voice persona, so it is not going to want you to change. And you know on some level, whether it's unconscious or not, that if I do this inner work, I'm going to have to let go of this persona and really step into the truth of who I am. And that means letting go of all the judgments and all the stories I've had around my voice and what isn't acceptable, and really allow this true freedom, true expression, true power and confidence to come through. So it can bring up a lot of stress, fear and anxiety. And that's why people procrastinate for a long time, because they don't really want to have to look at it. And it makes sense because it, as we've already talked about, this whole persona shadow thing has really been created by the ego to help us fit in and survive. And so now we're really sort of dismantling this and creating something new, but actually creating something that's more in line with who you actually are. So often my clients, when I start working with them, will, again, because as I say, they are in these big roles, they are usually very senior within companies, organizations, all run their own businesses, and they don't want other people knowing they're doing the voice coaching. So one of the very common things I have with testimonials that I get from clients is I will end up changing their name. And I don't mind doing this. I completely understand why this is the case. But there is a lot of judgment, fear and shame around doing this work, because I'm in this position, I should know what I'm doing, I shouldn't need help with this. And so a lot of the time I end up changing names. Just so you know, if you ever see any of my testimonials, they are genuine testimonials. I've just obviously honoured my clients' wishes and changed their name because I want the genuine testimonial. But also another thing that I've been asked to do many times is actually not put on an invoice what it actually is. So I will give the client a very generic invoice to give to their accounts department, because they don't want people to know what they're doing. And again, because our voice brings up a lot of fear, a lot of shame, a lot of embarrassment, a lot of judgment. We don't want to have to deal with it. And so I completely get it. It's absolutely fine. My coaching is highly confidential. I don't reveal names unless the client gives me permission to. So it's all absolutely fine, but it's all part of this idea that I've got to look like I've got it all together. I've got to uphold this persona of success. And that means everything that goes with it. And I can't be seen to be looking like I haven't got it together, that I don't know what I'm doing, that I've actually got all this fear and stress and anxiety around my voice, and I don't really want to have to admit that. So it's all very normal. It's all very much part of this journey. But just so that you can start to see maybe in your own voice, think about your industry and what you do, and what maybe if you were to describe the persona of someone that works in your industry, how much have you adopted? And also the opposite is also still persona. So what have you rejected? So it could be that you really hate something about the persona of someone in your industry. So you've just done the opposite, but it's not really come from a conscious place. It's more a rejection. it's two sides of the same coin. So you're still not really free, you're still pushing something away, but you're just doing the opposite. So we can either take on the persona or we can completely reject it and do the opposite. So start to investigate that in your own voice, in your own career. Where do I hold on to the success persona in every sense, not just voice, but in every sense of what it means to be successful in that industry? And how is that limiting my voice? What do I avoid? Where do I hold my voice back because it's not okay to do X, Y, Z? And am I willing to then take the steps forward to really start to allow myself to step into that authenticity, that authentic self, that authentic voice, which I would argue is far more empowering. And actually, you're going to be far more successful and it's going to be less exhausting because you're not going to have to be constantly pushing the shadow away to avoid something. You actually have the space then to be far more creative and actually get a lot more done when you're not spending so much energy trying to avoid parts of yourself. So if this has resonated with you, this is a big topic and I've tried to kind of keep it as simple as I can. And it's obviously going to be very personal to every single individual watching this video. It's obviously generic what I've talked about today. But if this has really resonated with you, if you know that there's a lot of fear, anxiety, and stress around your voice, and you've just had enough and you're like, right, I'm ready to face this, you are the kind of person I love working with. People that are really ready to face this, ready to do the emotional work, ready to look at these emotional patterns, but also are willing to do the training on your voice. So it's both, it's the physical training and the emotional unconscious work as well. And when you can combine the two, that is when you are truly powerful, truly confident, and unstoppable. And you won't care what other people think because ultimately the world is just a mirror anyway. So when you are really owning your power, you'll find that's what the world will reflect back to you. So thank you so much. If this is of interest, please book a 30-minute voice discovery call, or you can book a 60-minute reclaim your voice session if you actually want a full coaching session. But thank you so much for watching, and please leave me a comment if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on next week's video.